Coming up tonight, the debate on guns in America, New York State score on a recent infrastructure evaluation, and concussions in the NFL. Talking Points starts right now. Talking Points. I'm Max Darrow, your host. At this point in the show, we would usually take a look at our top talking points for the week, but tonight we're doing something a little bit different. Last week, a gunman opened up fire at Umpqua Community College in Oregon, killing 9, injuring 7, and then turning the gun on himself. This incident got us thinking about other mass shootings in America, so we decided to devote most of our show tonight to that topic. For the sake of clarity, when discussing mass shootings, we are using the FBI's definition, which includes events in which there are 3 or more killings in a single incident. First here to break down the stats on mass shootings in America is Talking Points correspondent Elijah Shama.
In a recent report by the FBI, mass shootings have, quote, risen drastically in the past half-dozen years. There were, on average, 16.4 such shootings a year from 2007 to 2013, compared with an average of 6.4 shootings annually from 2000 to 2006. The most deadly shooting occurred at Virginia Tech in 2007. In that shooting, 32 people were killed and 17 were wounded. The most injuries, 58 of them, resulted from a shooting at a movie theater in Colorado, where 12 people were also killed. A study done on mass shootings from 2006 to 2015 found that a breakup was the trigger in 1 to 4 mass shootings, whereas public killings, like the one at a school in Newtown, accounted for 1 in 6 mass shootings. In these cases, the study found that 57% of the victims knew their killer, even if they weren't the main target, and 1 in 4 victims were close family members or spouses. It was also found that 1/3 of the victims in these mass shootings were under the age of 18. In these shootings, nearly 3 out of the 4 weapons used were handguns. Automatic assault rifles made up only 0.5% of the guns used in shootings. The most common gun used in shootings is a Glock semi-automatic handgun. However, in a study from 1982 to 2012, it was found that half of the guns used in mass shootings were equipped with extended magazines. It was also found that 48 of the weapons used in this period would have been banned under the proposed assault weapons ban of 2013. In a study of those who commit these crimes, it was found that about 1/3 of the perpetrators do not leave the scene alive, and about 1/4 commit suicide after the crime. The racial breakdown of the shooters revealed that 65% of the killers were white, more than 16% of the killers were black, 6% of the killers were Hispanic, and less than 3% of the killers have been women. The state with the most mass shootings was California, while the state with the least was South Dakota.
And after these events, people are left questioning why they happened. Talking Points correspondent Ray Merrick explains how mental health and violence in the media factor into the debate. Ray, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Max.
So many politicians have argued that mental illness is the underlying cause of mass shootings in America. Is there a proven link between mental illness and gun violence?
Well, Max, the simple and quick answer is yes, there is, but it's extremely small. I think it's more important to point out that the vast majority of mentally ill individuals, they're not inherently violent, as many people might believe that they are. Actually, Jeffrey Swanson, he's a professor of psychiatry at Duke. He's a leader of research in this specific field, and he did research on more than 10,000 individuals, both who were mentally ill and completely healthy, and he found that of those individuals that committed acts of violence during the study, only 4% were mentally ill. And that violence, what was associated with it, were factors such as gender, socioeconomic levels, whether they were poor or not, and whether they were addicted to drugs or alcohol. So, yeah.
How have mass shootings now shaped the public's view of the mentally ill?
Well, I think the perception has actually become a little negative following some of these shootings. I think there's been a generalization that just because a few individuals were mentally ill, that pretty much the entire mental health community is a danger to everyone. I think it's important to point out the President's New Freedom Commission on Mental Health. They did a study and they found that stigma is causing people, society as a whole, to disassociate themselves from the mentally ill individuals, specifically schizophrenia, which is one of the most feared of the mental illnesses in America.
So switching gears, let's talk violence in the media. What are the major effects of violence in the media on young adults and specifically children?
So in 1982, the National Institute of Mental Health, this still stands today, they came out with three primary effects on children of violence in the media. And those are that children may become desensitized to violence, which is extremely dangerous, obviously, that children become more fearful of the world around them because they're not exposed to anything else before they see this violence. And most importantly, that children may become more aggressively, behave more harmfully to other children. And although the number of violent crimes has been falling, the amount of violence in the media has been picking up at the same time.
So how much has the prevalence of violence in the media, in video games, film, TV, even music, how much has that increased over the recent years?
Well, Max, I think this is an incredible statistic. In 1950, only 10% of American homes had televisions. Today, it's 99%. Obviously, with such an increase, you're going to have much more exposure to television and thus much more exposure to violence in the media. I think I'm going to talk about this. The typical American child views more than 200,000 acts of violence, including more than 16,000 murders before the age of 18. This is incredible, and it's hard to believe that with this much exposure and with somewhat of a link, that violence wouldn't be increased.
200,000, you said?
200,000.
That's
Yes.
a large number. Ray, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Throughout the country, the country's recent past, some mass shootings are particularly those at schools have been notable for the fear and horror they've inspired and for the way they've pushed communities to ask, how can we do better? Talking Points correspondent Tom Beckley-Forrest joins us now in studio to talk about some of the most influential school shootings in recent history.
One of the first shootings to disturb the public in such a way occurred on the morning of April 20th, 1999. Two armed teens took over Columbine High School, killing a dozen students, one teacher, and injuring 21 others before taking their own lives, almost an hour after the violence had started. Through extensive media coverage, images of the brutal attack were seared onto minds across the country, triggering wide national debates over the availability of guns and the youth culture that would allow such a thing to happen. 8 years later, in 2007, only 4 days before the anniversary of the Columbine massacre, 32 people were murdered and 17 injured on the campus of Virginia Tech by a mentally disturbed student. The Virginia Tech massacre was the deadliest shooting rampage in U.S. history. It prompted a massive response, revolutionizing campus security at both private and public colleges nationwide, including this university. 2 weeks later, Virginia's governor also passed a bill mandating improved background checks for gun buyers. But still, yet perhaps the most traumatic school shooting in recent history ripped apart the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut in December of 2012. A mentally disturbed man gunned down 20 small children and 6 adult staffers before killing himself. The children were all around 6 or 7 years old. The especially perverse nature of this massacre and the age of the victims shocked the nation much more deeply than previous shootings had and renewed the national debate on gun control and mental health with a new bitterness. One example of an outcome was the Sandy Hook Promise, a group that educates schools, parents, and community organizations on ways to prevent gun violence, and it has garnered roughly 494,000 members to date. These particular shootings have disturbed our society so profoundly because of how drastically they run counter to basic human values that we hold, such as the protection of the young and the sanctity of learning.
Coming up after the break, we're talking about gun control. Two Talking Points correspondents will join me in studio for a live debate on the topic. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
I've got a job to do today.
I've got a job to do today.
Have a good first day at work, Mom.
Your donations to Goodwill fund job training programs right in your community.
Feels good to start fresh, right?
Sure does.
And like that, you're a job creator.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play or even what you wear. You just need to be there Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you.
Thank you. You got a king?
Go fish. In your face, in your face.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Welcome back to Talking Points. After last week's shooting, many politicians have called for stricter gun regulations. Now I'm joined by Talking Points correspondents Josh Carney and Johnny Oliver to break down the debate on guns in America. Josh will be representing the conservative pro-gun side of the debate, and Johnny will be representing the liberal anti-gun side of the debate. In interest of full disclosure, Josh would like you to know that he does not personally agree with the position that he's arguing, but he has thoroughly researched the topic and will debate it as if he does support it. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us, Max.
So let's kick this off. Who should be allowed to buy guns, and is there anyone that shouldn't be allowed to buy guns?
Those that pass a federal background check and are deemed suitable to carry a weapon and discharge a weapon should be allowed to carry and use guns within the United States. It is critical that we do more to promote background checks so illegal gun sales to those who are unsuitable to carry a weapon cannot prosper.
I would agree. To go a little more in depth, I would say that people who have violent criminal past, as well as those who may not pass psychological background tests, who may have mental health issues, should not be allowed to purchase guns, as well as the legal age limit.
So for the record, you both agree there should be background checks?
Yes, extensive.
So when you say extensive, can you clarify that for me?
Extensive would mean nothing that infringes on individual rights, but is administered to all who legally want to own a gun. Therefore, we can prevent the gun show loopholes that are largely deemed inadequate within society and prevent a black market trade from overwhelming the market by and large.
And as I stated, those with troubled psychological issues as well as violent criminal pasts.
So what kinds of guns should people have access to? Should there be a limit?
There should not be a limit because it infringes on individual rights, and there should be restrictions on certain types of guns within a community, but not largely what people are concerned about. According to FBI data that was distributed by Gannett Publishing, 0.4% of major mass killings within the United States were at the beck and call of an assault rifle, and in fact 8.6% were as a result of a semi-automatic rifle, both that are attempting to be banned but largely have smaller implications compared to handguns. It's much more important that we address preventative care such as mental illness and investment in public spending to make sure that guns are getting into the right hands as opposed to restricting guns from a basic standpoint of just looking at it top down.
Johnny, should people be allowed to have assault rifles?
No, I would say not, Max. I would say that banning of fully automatic guns, semi-automatics, assault rifles should all be banned. For example, take the Umpqua shooting as well as the Sandy Hook shooting. Both shooters use an AR-15 weapon that can fire off 45 rounds in a minute. Although there are other weapons besides guns that can kill people, and obviously lower rate of fire weapons, weapons that can fire at such high rates should not be allowed.
So should there be a limit then on the number of guns a person can own?
I would say for handguns, no. If they pass a background check and they are clear, then I would say no. But as I said previously, any high rate of fire weapons, there should be 0 of them.
An assault weapons ban was instituted during the 90s that extended into the 2000s, and it largely worked in curtailing the purchases, but was led to expire by the Congress because there was no tangible data that supported that it was actually working. It was leading to less being purchased, but not actually less deaths as a result. People can still get possession of these guns. Therefore, there's no real reason to just deem them just unsuitable for the community at the expense of hunters and other organizations that need these or that use these, not necessarily need these weapons.
So the Second Amendment reads, and Claire, why don't you pull this up on the screen? Quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How do each of you interpret the Second Amendment?
The Second Amendment was built on the basis of ensuring public safety. While militias and tyrannical rule are not exactly a threat at this point, according to constitutional scholars at the Constitutional Center, it didn't account for many of the preventative measures that have been deemed burdensome in terms of regulation and have really bogged down the issue, getting away from just protecting public safety, but also getting into the realm of those who are just strictly against any guns within our community.
Johnny?
At the time of the Constitution was written, the most powerful guns were 17th century muskets. I don't know if our founding fathers could have predicted the incredible destruction that technology and the advancement of gun technology would have for us. And I think if they were around today, perhaps they would added a little bit more into their writing that the automatic and semi-automatic weapons shouldn't be outlined, that they are banned.
So the phrase, guns don't kill people, people kill people. I'd like to hear your thoughts. It's a very, very common phrase.
It is the most redundant phrase used on this issue. It is completely obsolete, and I'll tell you why. Because people who are killing other people with guns are criminals, and by the very definition of a criminal, they are going against the law. It is criminals who kill people, not people who kill people. Those who get guns illegally are not supposed to have guns in their possession because of a mental illness or other disturbances, should not be allowed to carry and discharge a weapon. Those who are actively trying to seek and do harm to their community are criminals. Criminals kill people. Criminals with guns obviously kill people, but people in that sense, it is a redundant argument from the conservative perspective.
People do kill people, but people are much more highly effective at killing people when they have a gun at their disposal, as opposed to another weapon such as a knife.
So
but that is somebody actively seeking to do harm. Whereas the interpretation of this context is that it is just if you have a gun, then you will have to have the power to go out and kill somebody. It is somebody who is actively seeking to do harm. So from that perspective, I have to largely disagree.
So what should a punishment look like then for somebody who illegally obtains a gun and opens fire? What should a punishment look like for somebody who gets a gun illegally? Forget the opening fire part because we all know how that should end. But what should that punishment look like?
Well, the gun should be confiscated. They should not be allowed to own and carry a weapon. They should not have a conceal and carry license. And they should not be able to use any sort of weapon if they're deemed unsuitable, which this would probably cause. And from just a general conservative perspective, it would lead to massive legal reparations that the person would have to face.
If there's a reason someone should not be owning a gun and they're going out of their way to illegally purchase a gun, I think that you're looking at, as Josh stated, gun confiscation as well as potential jail time.
Final question for you both. Should people be able to carry a concealed gun in public?
In the American public, by and large, there are gun-free zones that are in public spaces, but gun-free zones are, because they are in public spaces, and public spaces are largely where a lot of these shootings occur, it is really not doing us much good. And much of the American public favors actually having access to guns within these areas. And a specific statistic sourced from the Pew Research Center says that Americans are in favor of protecting gun rights at 52% to controlling gun ownership at 46%. Whereas Americans would having a gun in a situation where there's an active shooter would feel more comfortable than not having a gun. It's actually jumped 15% for those who feel more comfortable having a gun in their home than not in just a span of 15 years. So it's an impressive trend within the United States where people are feeling more comfortable owning a weapon for their own safety and protection. And therefore, it's imperative that the United States government allow people to have conceal and carry weapons that they can and be allowed to discharge their weapon in such a way.
Johnny?
According to the Violence Policy Institute, in 2010, there were 230 justifiable homicides in which a private citizen used a firearm to kill a felon. And in the case of only 230 in one calendar year, I'm not sure how well you can argue that a concealed gun is necessary.
Johnny and Josh, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We will be right back.
Which planet are we living on? Right here.
What do you think it would be like to teach?
chances are you have no idea. Teachers today are breaking down obstacles, finding innovative ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places, and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable. That's what it's like to teach.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
This may not be a report card that makes it to the fridge. Now, Talking Points correspondent Molly Smith will tell us how New York State scored on its infrastructure and how Syracuse fits in.
Report card that you want to bring home to mom. The American Society of Civil Engineers just graded New York State's infrastructure a C- overall, with roads coming in the worst at a D-. And here in Syracuse, it's clear that there's work to be done.
Manholes and potholes and sinkholes, oh my. These are just some of the problems with the roads in New York State and more locally, Syracuse. In their first ever infrastructure report card, the American Society of Civil Engineers graded the state's roads a D- based off of a variety of factors.
It's all evaluated on numerous different criteria ranging from maintenance and operation to available funding, resilience, future need, condition, and so on.
Here in Syracuse, the available funding is low and future need is high. Not the kind of balance that adds up to an A+.
But it's not like nothing's being done about it. If you're driving down South Salina Street right here at the intersection of Kennedy, I can already see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 projects going on just within this 2-block radius.
And there would be more work getting done if the budget allowed for it. Syracuse Common Councilor Bob Doherty says that federal grant money went above and beyond the city's funds to repair this busy intersection at Erie Boulevard and South State Street.
It was in very bad shape, especially a little bit further east of here. There were dips in it that were almost like swimming pools. Normally, like I said, we do about 6 miles per year in the city. It's about $500,000 per mile, which sounds like a lot of money, but that's what it is.
The city was awarded $10 million from the State Assembly over the summer to replace aging water mains, one of the contributing factors beneath the surface to poor road conditions above ground. Molly Smith, Citrus TV News.
Thanks, Molly. Now, the NFL is facing a crisis, but it has nothing to do with Deflategate or Commissioner Roger Goodell. Our own Topher Lane is here to talk about their concussion problem. Topher, good evening.
Thanks, Max. Well, football is a gruesome sport. That doesn't need to be elaborated. However, there has become a buffer between the fans and the shocking number of injuries in any football game. This isn't to say that fans aren't aware of the injuries, but they don't know how obscene it actually has become. By the end of week 2 of the current NFL season, 15% of active players had suffered an injury that sidelined them in the game. Many of these injuries would keep the players on the bench for at least 1 week. The NFL isn't pleased with this number, and the organization is progressive in its attempts to reduce injuries. This past offseason, for example, NFL team owners agreed to put in rules to try and prevent knee and leg injuries with low hits, but that hasn't prevented them entirely. But the biggest issue for the NFL is head injuries. Concussions have plagued the NFL since its creation, but over 100 players have suffered concussions each season for the past 3 years, ranging up to 171 in 2012. There are many issues with these numbers, though. For one, there's skepticism about whether all of the concussions are actually reported by teams. If a player does not pass concussion tests on the sideline after a possible head injury, he cannot return to the game. That hasn't stopped teams from putting players back in, though. It happened with Chicago Bear Chris Conte a year ago, and the San Diego Chargers safety Jaleel Addae in Week 8 of last season. The NFL has since improved their in-game concussion tests. Also, many players use painkillers before competing. The anti-inflammatory medications the players use can make it possible for the athletes to sustain a concussion, not realize it, and then continue to play. This can lead to more head trauma and exacerbate the injury. One of the solutions has been to create stronger helmets. However, brain trauma isn't really affected by wearing a helmet. A concussion occurs by the brain colliding with the inside of the skull, which typically happens by a quick stop of momentum. So if a linebacker repetitively crashes into an opposing linebacker, his brain could suffer trauma multiple times, regardless of any helmet he's wearing. One of the biggest issues, though, is the long-term effect of all the brain trauma these players are experiencing. Of the 91 currently deceased former NFL players, 87 of them had tested positive for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a degenerative brain disease linked to concussions. It can lead to depression, memory loss, and dementia. This isn't just a problem for the NFL, though. This is a problem for the sport of football. A report by the CDC says that a football player has a 75% chance of suffering a concussion. That includes high school, college, and even Pee Wee football, which our kids are playing now. Here at Syracuse, fans saw QB Eric Dungy go down with a reported upper body injury, which had to do with a nasty helmet-to-helmet collision. What looked like it could have been a concussion has still not actually been reported so, and Dungy missed the game because of it. All in all, the sport of football is facing a crisis with concussions, and the future is blurry for America's favorite sport.
The road to 2016 continues. Here's how the polls stand right now. For the Republicans, the three non-politician candidates sit on top. Donald Trump still leads, Dr. Ben Carson remains in second, and Carly Fiorina in third. Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush come in fourth and fifth. Moving to the Democrats, nothing has changed from last week. It reads Hillary, Sanders, and Biden, even though it's still unclear if the vice president will declare his candidacy or not. Now we'll go to Talking Points correspondent Alex Amico for profiles on Marco Rubio and Martin O'Malley.
Thanks, Max. This week on Road to 2016, we're taking a look at two more candidates. On the Republican side, we have Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Rubio, in many ways, is a Republican version of President Obama. Both were young minority candidates, both have about the same experience in the U.S. Senate, and both are seen as excellent speakers. Rubio is seen largely as an establishment Republican, but he does have appeal among more staunch conservatives as well. The most recent Quinnipiac poll also shows him ahead of his mentor, Jeb Bush, in their home state of Florida. Rubio has turned in two outstanding debate performances so far. He emphasizes foreign policy knowledge as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and managed to make a more personal appeal to voters by discussing his family's journey to America and his own life growing up as the son of immigrants. Immigration is one area where his more conservative foes can challenge him. He co-sponsored a comprehensive immigration bill loathed by conservatives. He has since come out against it. Another issue is his voting record. Rubio has missed more votes than any other senator this year, including a recent vote on a key defense bill. Despite this, Rubio is in a very strong position, and many unnamed Democrats say that he is the candidate that they are most scared of in a general election. On the Democratic side, there is former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. O'Malley has had some of the worst luck of any candidate in this campaign. In the very early stages of speculation over this campaign, many thought he would be the primary liberal challenger to Hillary Clinton. However, the entrance of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders took away a significant deal of momentum that could have gone to O'Malley. One issue that he has made a centerpiece of his campaign is gun control. He has run ads against Sanders criticizing his record on gun control. He has also been outspoken about the need for more Democratic primary debates, as he needs them to gain traction in the polls. One strike against O'Malley is the fact that his hand-picked governor successor in Maryland was defeated by a Republican last fall, an event that can be seen as a rebuke of O'Malley's policies in a deep blue state. O'Malley polls at around 1% in nearly every major national and state poll. He remains very much a long shot, and the entrance of Vice President Biden could make that status irreversible. Back to you, Max.
Thank you, Alex. That's all the time we have for Talking Points tonight. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you can check out the Talking Points blog for our original posts from our correspondents. I'm Max Darrow from all of us here at Citrus TV. Enjoy the rest of your night, Syracuse.